that is classified as a non-physical reality. Let's make a simple example. The family is sitting at the table, and then a boy, maybe 15 or 16 years old, looks up and suddenly says to his mother, "Hey, Mom, look, Grandma is standing there in the corner." The mother looks around and says, "Oh no, there's no Grandma there." Today we'll talk about the nature of consciousness and about a particular model that, in the 1970s, was proposed by Itzhak Bentov, a self-taught biomedical engineer who sought to give a scientific foundation to inner experiences and states of consciousness. His personal story is extraordinary. Born in Czechoslovakia, Bentov lost his parents and two brothers in Nazi concentration camps during World War II. A Holocaust survivor, he managed to escape to Palestine, where he became part of the first scientific corps of the Israeli army, the Hemet, and was recognized for inventing the first Israeli rocket during the 1948 War of Independence. All of this without any formal scientific education. After the war, he moved to the United States, where he became a pioneer in biomedical engineering. At the same time, he began exploring the mysteries of consciousness, combining physics, biology, and spirituality in a completely original way. In 1977, he published Stalking the Wild Pendulum, a book that even today draws attention for the boldness of its ideas and for its attempt to build a bridge between science and inner experience. Sadly, the life of Itzhak Bentov was cut short in 1979. He was aboard American Airlines Flight 191, which had departed from Chicago bound for Los Angeles when, shortly after takeoff, the plane crashed, killing all 271 people on board and 2 more on the ground. It remains remembered as the deadliest aviation accident in the United States before September 11th. With him, the world lost not only an inventor and engineer, but also a visionary mind that was opening new paths in the study of consciousness. And yet, despite his premature death, Bentov's voice still speaks. Today we have the opportunity to hear him once again thanks to his last recorded interview, which has been remastered to restore its original quality and made available to a wider audience through Spanish dubbing, a unique occasion to rediscover his words directly and be inspired by the ideas of a man who, from a childhood marked by tragedy, went on to ask the deepest questions of existence. We all began long ago in a place where there was an undifferentiated kind of matter which slowly, over millions and millions of years, evolved into a very complex organism that we now call the human being. It has a nervous system that, at this particular moment, we understand as being sensitive to certain levels of reality through our eyes, ears, and other sensory perceptions. And this is what we call ordinary material reality, which allows us to drive cars and work every day. However, there is an evolutionary movement that will continue pushing us beyond where we are today, and what will be pushed is our soul. At some point, we will have higher consciousness experiences, in which higher realities are not only seen but also lived, and in the end, we will reach perfection, whether we like it or not. The question I want to ask you is, where do you see us now in that evolutionary development? We could say that, if we take Darwin's theory as correct, we know that we have evolved from monkeys into humans. And now we have finally reached the point where we have humanoid form, upright spines, are reasonably intelligent, can press TV buttons, drive cars, etc. What I'm drawing here is called a bell curve, and it's used to describe random events. We can also use this diagram to describe evolution. Most of today's population is this intelligent, well, more or less intelligent biped with a vertical spine who presses TV buttons and drives cars, etc. Now, at one end of the curve, there are a few people who are still like gorillas, very hairy. They beat their chests when they see their neighbors and things like that. And then, at the opposite end, there are a few people who are highly developed, because we know evolution is pushing humanity in that direction, away from gorillas toward more evolved brains. At this point, we are here. What will happen in 1,000,000 years? In 500,000 years? This curve will shift like this, meaning that the majority of the population will be very, very evolved in what we have here now. The average man of today will then be considered the backward one. In evolutionary terms, most of the population will be extremely evolved, and the front line of evolution, meaning this group here, will be highly developed beings. We can't even imagine what kind of person that will be. They might not even have a physical body. So what is the habitat, so to speak, of this group here? Well, go outside, you'll find them everywhere. But the habitat of this other group, where do you think we find these people? I'd say we find them in universities among very bright intellectual people. Well, I say we find them in psychiatric hospitals. And the reason is that these people live in a different reality, one that is very altered, and few of them are adapted to live in our current one. Naturally, they can't function well in society. So the only safe good place for them is the asylum, unless they manage to integrate their different vision of reality into everyday life. Now, if they do integrate it, then we get people like Newton, Darwin, Faraday, the so-called geniuses. So, what is evolving? It's the nervous system that is evolving, and the nervous system is supported by the skeleton, bones, muscles, tissues, etc. Now, the nervous system gives us the image of our reality. That reality you see around you, flowers, chairs, microphones, teacups, is given by our senses. We do not see light beyond UV or infrared. We hear only a limited range of vibrations from roughly 52 to 20,000 hertz. In other words, all our senses are limited. So these limited senses are like a very narrow slit of the total reality that exists. As we evolve, that slit opens wider and wider, and we see more and more of reality. We may think we are seeing different realities, but in truth, it's a broader vision of the same infinite reality. The Bible mentions perhaps 4 to 6 colors at most. That is what people saw 4,000 years ago. Today we see hundreds, thousands of colors. That means our visual system has evolved. Our fellow mammals, cows, horses, see only in black and white. That's an example of nervous system evolution. Our senses, eyes, ears, etc., are extensions of our brain. I see. So earlier you were talking about those more evolved people who are in psychiatric hospitals or who are geniuses. These are people with expanded perception, able to see a reality that ordinary people in this phase of evolution cannot see. Exactly. And what is the nature of that reality they are able to see? Well, that is classified as a non-physical reality. Let's make a simple example again. A family is sitting at the table, and then a boy, maybe 15 or 16 years old, looks up and suddenly says to his mother, "Hey, Mom, look, Grandma is standing there in the corner." The mother looks around and says, "Oh no, there's no Grandma there." Then she says, "Well, there's something wrong with you. You need help. Are you crazy?" So she takes him to the friendly neighborhood psychiatrist. The same thing happens. The psychiatrist asks, "Okay, what do you see?" "Well, don't you see it, doctor? Don't you see her there in the corner?" The psychiatrist says, "No, there's nothing in the corner." Then he says, "Oh, young man, you're really in trouble." And then he writes a prescription, a bit of Thorazine or electroshock or whatever, and very soon, within 2 weeks, the boy will be very normal again. He won't see other realities anymore. He won't see anything at all? Yes? And you'd say there's a good chance that boy? Yes, a good chance that the boy had a spontaneous opening of his senses, meaning evolution pushed him a bit forward. Yes, this happens sometimes. And there are also techniques to do it. Eastern traditions, yogis, they've developed systems to achieve this, to stimulate the nervous system faster. But very often it happens spontaneously, without anyone trying to make it happen. It just does. In ancient times, these kinds of things were called miracles. Today there are no more miracles. And this is what we do with miracles. We grind them down until they turn to dust. So there are no more miracles. You've spoken of the evolution of the nervous system, but there's something else that's evolving, something capable of being sensitive to this higher level of reality. We have this notion of the soul. Most people don't think much about the soul. They see it as a non-physical, highly theoretical thing. That's the average person's idea of the soul, but in reality it's not like that. We don't have a soul, rather the soul has us. So what evolves, the permanent and eternal, is the soul. The body is disposable, like a car. You use it for 80,000 or 100,000 miles, it breaks down and that's it. You take another one. The driver is the soul, which uses the body for a while and then leaves it and takes another one soon after. So it's the soul that experiences evolution, not our personality or physical existence. The soul is the repository of information that we collect during our lives. Let's draw another diagram. Here's a physical body, and another, and another. This is Joe, this is Jim, and this is Sarah. Now that's the physical level. At this level, we are all separate. Now let us draw another level, a little higher. We'll call it the soul level. At this level, there's a bit of overlap. The soul of one person extends almost infinitely, touching that of another, meaning that souls, in a sense, are in contact with each other. Now, if we go higher, to the higher self level, sort of the boss of the soul, we find even more overlap. At the highest level, the spiritual level, we completely overlap. Everything and everyone is everywhere. In other words, we become omnipresent, a state of highly spiritual, perfect beings, or in other words, gods. So we exist on all those planes simultaneously? Yes, on all of them at once, but we're not aware of it. So, from your point of view, when we see ourselves as separate entities, that's only one plane of reality, correct? And whether we like it or not, we are evolving to become divine beings. That's the purpose of evolution, naturally, because at that point, you begin to understand how the system works. And one of the beautiful things about the system is that it wants to teach you something about itself. What does it want to teach you? Well, if you are omnipresent and know everything, that's the state the system wants you to reach,